Hey everybody, this is Perch. Is DC Comics dying? Are they about to stop producing comics? This question comes up with a lot of regularity. And there's a lot of different ways to look at this topic, and I want to try and go through all the different pieces. Now, I've done a lot of videos covering this. I've been on different streams talking about it. I was talking about it just this last weekend, where one of the guests on the panel was former DC independent contractor. I won't say employee, but independent contractor is a more accurate word, which isn't a slight against him or anyone. It's I'm going to keep. Here's why I keep bringing up that. By the way, somebody was throwing a bunch of heat at me on another channel, saying that I always use this word independent contractor. Why don't I just say employees? Well, because employees is wrong. They're not employees, and I think it is the root of a lot of problems. I think as independent contractors, it allows the big publishers to skirt a lot of restrictions and guidelines that they would need to do if somebody was an actual employee. I think it allows them to get away with not paying benefits properly. And just, I think there's a lot of shenanigans that get pulled because they're listed as independent contractors. So I say that because one, it's accurate. But two, I keep poking that bear because I do think that the way the comic industry works and is kind of formulated and structured winds up being shady in various areas to the detriment of a lot of people, to customers, to employees, to independent contractors, and so on. And so I think that's one point I don't want to relax on. I had an editor at Marvel tell me, you should just call them all employees and stop making that distinction because, you just should do it that way. I was like, that made me want to do it even less. Like, if you tell me not to do something, I want to do it even less. At any rate, I was on this panel, and Vince Guyver's view, as he says on his channel, is that DC is coming to an end. They're going to stop producing monthly comics, and he's got some reasons for saying that. And he's certainly well connected into that company, and he knows a lot of people, and he understands the inside of that business. So in many cases, what he's looking at, which was what all of us are looking at, are various indicators and signs that seem to suggest whether they're going one direction or another. Now, I've held firm, and I continue to today, to say, no, the company isn't going to stop producing comics. I think they're going to continue to produce comics. I think they're going to continue to produce monthly comics for at least a period of time. But what is true, and this is the sticking point, I think, with a lot of people, is that things are absolutely changing. DC is changing as a company, but for that matter, so is Marvel, so is everyone. The comic industry is going through a shift, and it's a fairly major shift. And all of us are down right in the middle of it right now, so it's kind of hard to take a step back and look and see. And we're also very polarized with opinions. It'd be nice if we were Polaroids. That would be, we'd have, what, Instagram filters? I don't even know how that would work. Anyway, we're all very polarized because the nerves are raw. We've gone through a lot of things in the society around the pandemic and the election, all the rest. But comics in general are people are ready for a fight, and a lot of that has to do with what's very aggressive behavior on the side of some of the people who work within comics. We've lost the ability to say, hey, I disagree, but good for you, more power to you. It doesn't work like that anymore. There's a lot more hostility in everyone. And everybody, when I say these things, people come in the comments and they want me to say that this person is more hostile than that person. And that's a non-winning game. I think I can say it this way, which I think is the accurate way. There's a line of hostility. There's a point where it stops being productive to be hostile at each other. And lots of people cross that line at various times. It doesn't really matter who's better or who's worse at it, because once you cross that line into being hostile, you lose customers. You start fighting. It doesn't, like, does it really matter? Do I have to stack rank? If this creator's behavior is worse than this creator's behavior, it doesn't matter. At some point, you're just driving away customers. Regardless, it stops mattering what you're doing. But if we could have some perspective, if we could take a step back and look at this industry and look at what's happening, there's a ton of factors that are in play right now with the comics industry. The retail market, which AKA the comic shop, the direct market, the places that sell the comics, is hurting. The big box stores like Barnes & Noble and others that sell other graphic novels are hurting. We're seeing a huge influx of YA content with Scholastic, who's doing quite well with it and have figured it out. And we're seeing a lot of other companies trying to copy that with, let's say, no success or extremely little success. They're not making progress, which means Scholastic is still sitting as champion there. We're seeing manga figure out digital distribution. That's why I keep hammering on that point, and people keep shouting at me, I don't care about digital. It's like, okay, you cannot care about it, but you see manga entering into the collective kind of views of audiences outside of Asia faster and faster and faster. And they're doing it through a combination of digital and collected works that are coming into the market extremely fast. The speed at which that material is coming here is outpacing traditional comics in this country. So you're seeing a heavy amount of disruption from two relatively new players. At the same time, you're seeing Marvel and DC, who are really Disney and AT&T, take very different approaches to their line. And this is probably the biggest case where, when I say, no, I don't think DC is dying, but I think it is going through radical change. And they're going through radical change because it's not really DC anymore. It's AT&T. And just like it's no longer Marvel, it's Disney. Yes, the brands are still there, and the brands are always going to be there. But here's the piece, and I tried to explain this over the weekend, but I was doing it in a convoluted, poor way, and people wanted to go on to other topics. But if you look at these big corporations, they spend money on marketing and what they call brand proliferation constantly. And here's an interesting aspect to it. The amount of money that the Walt Disney Company spent on licensing and brand awareness and marketing, not licensing incoming money, but licensing out, meaning money they pay. The amount of money that they spent on Avengers Endgame exceeds the amount of money that Marvel spent producing comics for the entire year. That one movie, and it wasn't close. It was like, I believe, somewhere in the realm of 4 to 5x what they spent. Now, why would they do that? Because that's where the big money is coming from. That's where the billion-dollar bet is. Now, why does that matter for comics? Well, comics does play a role in all that. But when people talk about Marvel and DC, they're talking about it from an 80s or 90s viewpoint, which is these companies are standalone companies having to make a profit. And that's not the game that those two companies are playing anymore. It no longer really matters if they're making a profit. It's marketing spend. It's literally just brand proliferation. Now, here's the funny part. Even though that is true in how they're viewed as companies, it doesn't mean that they're doing it well. And so when we talk about how DC and Marvel are going to change and are going to adapt over the coming months, it's really going to have a lot to do with how effective they are at getting that brand out there, how effective they are about being a showcase for larger efforts within those two companies. And they don't have it worked out today. It's pretty clunky today. So what does that mean? It means that there are going to be major changes at Marvel and DC to bring them more in alignment as a marketing arm for that company. That's going to mean different executives in a lot of cases. It's going to mean a different approach. But there is something very powerful from a marketing perspective to have a monthly comic coming out. It's eyeballs on pages. The problem is there's going to be more of an effort to make those efforts really stick and really count. AT&T and Disney are not going to be thinking about how much margin they make on a $4.99 comic. That's completely irrelevant to them. What they are going to be thinking about is the scale of readers, subscribers, eyeballs. Is this money going into this brand marketing more or less effective than if they just printed a bunch of flyers and distributed them to schools? It's a different game. And so I'll say two things, and it really depends on you and how you want to view it. DC Comics is not going to die, but the DC Comics you knew, if you grew up with DC in the 80s and the 90s, that DC Comics, that style of publisher is dying. In fact, arguably is already dead. That company does not exist anymore. It's a very different company. It's going to be still churning out plenty of comics. So it all matters to you. If you as a consumer, all you care about is getting a Superman comic in your hands on a regular basis, that's going to keep happening. It's going to keep happening for, at least several years. They're not going to stop producing comics because it's very valuable from a marketing perspective, but they are going to stop thinking along the lines of, we need to beat Marvel head to head month by month. Nobody's going to think that way. They're not going to be thinking about we need to have 50 comics in the comic shop in order to have this kind of campaign. They're not going to think that way either. In fact, in the weirdest possible way, I would expect a lot of the collector trappings, variants, and other things to start to vanish. It's going to be strange, but I can almost guarantee you that those kinds of aspects are going to become a lower and lower and lower priority. Within these companies, the idea that you're turning a profit from month to month is going to be a lower priority. Now, what's not going to change is they're still going to try and do comics on the cheap because it's marketing dollars. They're going to try and stretch those marketing dollars as far and as wide as they possibly can. But whether these comics actually produce money is secondary to if they're producing eyeballs. And those aren't the same thing. You might think they are, but they're not. The goal is to get these comics out there and get attention like any other brand, like a lunchbox, like a t-shirt, like a hat. And it's a very different way of thinking of these comic publishers. It's extremely different. So different that the majority of people, collectors, other people looking at this, that doesn't even compute. And that's why you're seeing a lot of people talk about how the companies are dying. In effect, they are and they aren't. The company you knew is dying. The company itself is going to continue to trundle along. But things are going to be different. That is inevitable. I get hit from time to time. I've heard it from a couple of people. It's like a popular thing to smack me around about. Is that I say, well, it's not this way. It's actually this other way, and it's very similar. Not really. This is a fairly significant change. It's a fairly significant difference, and frankly, it will make you, the reader, the person following along on all this, a lot happier if you can kind of wrap your head around the fact that we're dealing with a very different company with a very different mission statement now. That's just what we've got. I'll do some more videos in the future about what we can expect out of these companies and really try and draw. But if you want to educate yourself really quickly, if you want to kind of see how people view things, head over to Disney's website, head over to AT&T's website. In fact, in many ways, AT&T is better at this. And look at their cross promotion. Look at their affiliates. Look at the people that they're working with to try and grow and build the AT&T brand and all of its offerings. Look at how they're doing that. And now picture DC is one of those properties that they're playing with now. And that will give you a really good indication of how they're going to treat these properties in the future. It's not going to be comics. And yeah, there's going to be some pain along the way. I think the direct market, if being in a huge struggle just to stay alive as a retail shop wasn't hard enough, this isn't going to make it easier. Because there isn't going to be a loyalty at the big publisher level for those shops to stay alive. All they care about is a channel to keep spreading this marketing and getting these comics and these pieces into people's hands. And if they could do that through a grocery store or a mall, if that still existed, or Amazon or wherever it happens to be, they'd be happy to do it. They don't really care. And one of the big changes from at least the recent past is that the comic publishers, even though sometimes they were at odds, they really did understand that the comic shops were important to keep alive. Today, with the new AT&T and the Disney and that kind of model, that's a lot less important. And you're going to see that play out. Anyway, my prediction. Like I said, I'll do more videos talking about this in the future of what we can expect. This is a glass half empty or half full kind of scenario. You can look at this and say, hey, there's some stability in this. There's some power in this. Maybe this is a good thing. Maybe this will give me more of what I want from a bigger brand. Or maybe you can say, you know what, the company and the product that I used to love is going to fundamentally shift and I won't follow along and it's dead to me. It can go either way. Let me know what you're thinking. Do you think the company is going to collapse tomorrow? Do you think it's going to be this kind of half collapse? Do you think it's going to irrevocably change? Or do you think it's going to be status quo and everybody's being crazy? It's all just going to keep going. What do you think? Leave me a comment below, like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, and thanks for listening.